Awesome. So thank you very much. And hopefully you're here to look at old name, new CLI. So it's why you should look at SQL CMD. And if I get my clicker, then we can do some of that. So who am I? My name is Rob. You can find me on the internet. Go and search for me. Get in contact if you need to. I have a blog post. I'm lucky enough to be a Microsoft MVP because Microsoft say that I talk about things. And I work in two worlds. I work in the data platform world, but also in the PowerShell automation world when it comes to community things. Outside of that, for work, I just help people make stuff go, do automation for normally data platform type projects. So let's talk about SQL CMD. So I don't know if anybody can remember what came before SQL CMD. I mean, it's a long, long time ago. And there were two products. There was iSQL and osql. And osql, we think, probably stands for old SQL, and iSQL stands for interactive. And that's the way people were able to query the databases, the SQL databases, very, very long time ago. And really, pretty much, you could query your database. That was about all that you could do there. You couldn't parameterize anything. You had no admin connection. You know, it was not the best of things. So in November 2005, Microsoft released SQL 2005, and that came with SQL CMD once a couple of CU updates had come in. And this uses ODBC to connect to so I wasn't expecting that slide. Connect to SQL. And that was brilliant, and it worked for many years, and everybody could use it. But the problem is, doesn't work with ARM-powered devices, doesn't work with Fruit-powered devices, doesn't work with Linux operating systems, doesn't work with containers. So something new was needed. Microsoft decided what they were going to do was make use of this open source project called Go MS SQL DB and turn that into a new SQL CMD. So now we've got two SQL CMDs. We've got the older one, which we're calling sort of SQL CMD ODBC, and this one, which is Go. And the reason it's called Go SQL CMD, or known as that, is because it's written in Go. Go is brilliant because it allows you to write your code once and then compile into a single executable for all of the platforms and all the architectures. I mean, a different executable for each one of them, but it just comes out as one exe, no DIL files or anything like this. So first question we normally get asked when we're talking about SQL CMD is, that's brilliant, but does it work with the old versions? Oh, well, yes. Yes, it does. Pretty much everything that you could do with SQL CMD, you can still do with SQL CMD, except for some bits and bobs. So this isn't the full list. We'll have a look at the full list in a second. But the most important one is the -R, because client regional settings. Go has no understanding of what these are, so you're just going to get that connectivity. You can't use enable quoted identifiers. You've got to use set quoted identifier off. In the first release of SQL CMD, -P password was removed, and we said, actually, that's really useful. Can we have that back again? And because SQL CMD is now open source and available on Git, you can see that we've just added it back in. So the beauty of that is that when you want a feature for SQL CMD, if you go and put it into the GitHub issues, then the team there will work on it, and hopefully it'll get added in. So how do we put it in? If you want to install it, you just use your package manager. So you do a winget install, or a choco install, or a brew install, or an apt-get install, or a yum install, SQL CMD. And then let that take control of and it'll install SQL CMD onto your machine. If you need to upgrade, pretty much all of those, just you replace install with upgrade, and then you will have the next version of SQL CMD. And we talked about containers. So SQL CMD now is more than just a query executable CLI for connecting to your SQL database and running queries. Now we can do much, much more. It can really become part of your development environment. And working with containers, it allows you to just build up new instances with new containers, new databases, easy as pie. You don't need to know all of the Docker commands or how to mount a volume or how to make sure your network is bridged or any of these other things that some people really enjoy doing. You can just write one line of code and boof, you can have it all installed for you. So those are all the slides. There we are. What are we? 7-8 minutes in, and we're done with slides. So don't forget, if you have a question, just ask the question. So let's have a look at some code. So we're sat inside at Visual Studio Code. And down the bottom here, you can see we're running just PowerShell, but this could work in any CMD. We could run this in Bash. And first of all, we're just going to say, let's check what version we are. So SQL CMD -- version, and we're on version 1.4.0. Now, if we go and have a look at GitHub, Microsoft/go sqlmd at github.com, you can come down here and you can see we're running the latest version. And you can also see there are some issues here. So sometimes there are some things here that we might want to look at, go and see how people are working and what's happening. And you can see how they are working with the pull requests. So you can actually see that some of these pull requests have been opened and they're adding in some additional functionality. Some of these are quite interesting. We're going to, in fact, have a look at some of this in a second. But one of the beautiful things about this new SQL CMD, I think, is the help. So instead of just having a little bit of help, you've got a really comprehensive help within this. All you need to do is type -- help, and you're going to get all of these things and all of these commands. But you'll see as we go along, it doesn't just give you the help when you ask for help. It actually helps you along the way by giving you examples and telling you what you can do next. So I think that's just really positive. I like these new modern CLIs that we've got here. Now, if for some reason you are required to have code that runs on old versions of SQL CMD as well as new versions of SQL CMD, you can still do that on the same machine. We're on a desktop today, so we're going to push this one. So we're just going to navigate to a different location. And now you can see that this time our version is, 16.0 is the version. So this is a 2022 instance, but we've got our SQL CMD here, and this is the original SQL CMD, the ODBC one. You can see that's got this sort of help on it. But let's leave that where it should be, away in a folder somewhere, and let's move on to our new location. So we're going to have a look at this. And you can see that even if you just put in your question mark as your help request, that's going to give you the old style of help. You still get the same help from the same. If we get all the way up top here somewhere, we're still going to get up to version 1.4.0, but we've just got these old flags there. So I said we can just use it to query databases, but first of all, we need a database. So let's create a new SQL container. Now, unlike Andrew Prusky, we're not going to go and find an image and download it and mount it and run it and make sure our ports are out and do all of this. What we're going to do is we're going to first have a look at which versions of SQL we can get These are all the official Microsoft SQL Server containers. And these would be really useful if you know that you've got a 2017 instance that's running CU17. Maybe you just want to spin up a container really quickly, run something absolutely against the correct version, and then throw it away again. You don't need to keep multiple versions on different demo boxes somewhere. But all we're looking for is, how does this T-SQL work with this CU? How is the performance? What's happening with my query plans? And you can go and work with that. Now, if you don't put in a tag at all, it's just going to take the latest version. And that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to say sqlcmd create MS SQL. And I'm going to say, I would like to accept the EULA because we need to make sure we accept our licensing. And I'm going to use this -- cache. So I'm going to use this all the way through now. And that just means don't go and re-download the image. Otherwise, we're just sitting waiting for a download all the time. And we can say, right, run that. And it says, OK, I'm starting with MCR, Microsoft.com, MSQL Server latest. I'm creating a context. I've disabled the SA account, I've rotated the SA password, and I've created a user, Mr. Rob, because that's what I'm logged into this machine as. And now I'm ready for client connections on port 1433. So it's done all of that without us even asking for it. I remember I said how wonderful this new help was, because the next thing it does is says, here, well, look, have a look at all this. We've got all these things that you can do now. Basically, don't really need me doing a demo. You could just go and do it all yourself now. But let's carry on. So we'll talk about contexts first. And the context means, you see it said it created a context MS SQL here. This is our connection to this SQL instance. So we think about if you use Kubernetes, think about Kubernetes context. You can switch context between different clusters or different accounts. This is going to be the same. We can go and have a look at them. And if we remember to spell it correctly, try that again. There we go. You can see we've got our context. And this is going to say we have this container. Here is the ID of our container. Tells us which image it is. Gives us our endpoint. So if we wanted to use a different IP or DNS name, we could do that. And which port we've got, and what the name of this endpoint is. And then it has a context. This is my context. I'm going to use this endpoint and this user, because maybe I might have an admin connection and a non-admin connection, or a read-only connection and an admin connection. We might want to switch between the two, but they're still connecting to the same instance. And then it says which user. This is Mr. Rob, and it's basic authentication, and the password is redacted. Well, I was going to say redacted. I mean, there's the password. If we just put in a -- raw, then we get to see the password. And right now we've got a password encryption of not. We can change that. We'll have a look at that later on. And when we're building up some sort of things, maybe we want to have our connection strings. Here are all of our connection strings, just with a sqlcmd config, connection - strings. That's going to spit out all of these connection strings for us in a nice string for us, which means that if you know a little bit of PowerShell, you can put that to a connection strings, and then we can split this up. And now we have our connection. Oh, that's beautiful. This is why I check these things. Let's try that again. Here we go. We'll do our password string. There we go. So there is our password. Grab it into there. We can create a credential, which means that we could use sqlcmd -u and the username -p and password, and then we could just run a query. Excellent. The old style commands will work the way we're used to doing things. sqlcmd -usa and go. I've done that so many times in the past when I've been connecting to my instances, but we can do that. But with new sqlcmd, we don't even need to do that. We've got a -- query command. So we can just do sqlcmd -- query and run our query. And there is all of our query. But even better, of course, we can run this against DBA tools. What I forgot to do is reload DBA tools to tell you that Version 2 of DBA tools means that you will need to change to use a set SQL connection trust certificate value. So we've built that into DBA tools so you can do that. That's what you will need to do. You can also set it to run all the time. Okay, so let's use SQL CMD and we'll create ourselves a new database. We called it DB Junk. And now what we can do is we can now open Azure Data Studio. So we've got this random password that's been generated. I don't need to go and grab it. I can just run SQL CMD, open ADS, and most of the time it'll work absolutely perfectly and it will open on the wrong screen. Of course, it's going to open on the wrong screen. Now, the problem with this is when you do lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of demos, is that every now and again something gets cached, which is what it did to me earlier. So we will see what we get. And there we go. Starting SQL service. Here we go. And now we get the same error. So this enable trust certificate, this is exactly what you get with DBA tools. And it's also what you get with Management Studio. It's also what you get with Azure Data Studio. And you just need to have an enable. And we get a login failed. Of course we do. And this is a caching thing. This is Rob has a cached connection in there that I can't seem to clear regularly. But let's carry on. Let's create ourselves a new database. And this time I'm going to create a database automatically. So last time I created DB Junk just with some T-SQL. This time I'm going to say, hey, SQL command, just create me a new instance. And I would like you to create me a user database called Data Weekender, please. Okay, so this time you'll notice that we've got a new context called MS-SQL2, and we've disabled the SA account, we've rotated the SA password, we created a new user, that's all excellent. We created a default database, and we're ready for client connections on port 1434. So if we did a Docker ps -a, whoa, look at that, get all the things. Let's just do Docker ps then. There we are. So now we can see that Unruffled Shore is the name of the new one that we created. That's 1434. And Nice McNulty, I love the names they give them here, is 1433. And interestingly, if you were following Rob's presentation earlier, this is a data API builder that's against the SQL Bits database, but that's by the by. It's still up and running. So we've got these two containers who are there and that are running, and now we're automatically connected. We've switched to the new one that we've created. If we have a look at that, we should have a Data Weekender database, and if we want to run our SQL CMD against our database, the Data Weekender database, we just pass that into the -- database flag. And we could also run a file. So maybe in this scenario, we were working on our DB Junk database, and Justin came in and said, I've got a problem with Data Weekender. Please, can you go and have a look at the database? Oh, yes, right, hang on. Spin up a container, running the right version of SQL. We'll create a database called Data Weekender, and then we'll just run a file to create the schema of our database, see what our problems could be. So with SQL CMD, pass in an input file. Excellent. So now we can see what we've got. Let's go and have a look at our Data Weekender database, and you'll see that we've got a table holding data with a bad name. This is the sort of thing I used to do when I was a wicked DBA, is create tables around with spaces in their names, or you wait, you see, there's some good stuff in here. Even better, I always had every table had a calculated column of 1 divided by 0, so that when developers came and told me their query was failing with a 1 divided by 0 error, I'd say, yes, well, stop using select star. Just take the columns that you need. Anyway, that's by the by. So let's have a look at some things that will make Justin go, And what we've got here, if we have a look at our columns in our table holding data with bad name, is we've got some brilliant column names. And you can see that what you get is this awkward formatting. Now, luckily, we can just do this, pass in -- format equals vert. And now, instead of having everything sort of all higgledy-piggledy, it'll come out vertically. That's going to work really well here where we've got one row and we've got some columns. It's not going to work very well when you've got 1,000 rows and 100 columns. It's going to look a bit odd. But you can see that here we've got a column that's called ID underscore identity identifier. It's a number and it's an int. And we've got a column that's a load of big blobby data underscore var binary. That's funny enough is a var binary. And we've got a column of different casing and formatting dash varchar max. That's a varchar. So we've got all that. That's one way of looking at things. We can also just open up SQL CMD. So I don't need to pass in any username, no password. I'm not using integrated authentication here. I'm using the authentication that's defined within my context. I've got SQL CMD, and then I can do something funky. If I do colon list, which is what's known as a magic command, and then color spelled incorrectly because the Americans wrote this, what you can do is you see what all of these different types of color schemes that we've got. Maybe we want to go for rainbow dash. I'd choose rainbow dash as our color scheme. And now I can use this other magic command, set var, and I set a variable. This is SQL CMD color scheme, and I've set it to be rainbow dash. And now if I run the same query again, yes, thank you, please do that for me. There we go. Now I get my data out in a color scheme. This is the rainbow dash color scheme. And it looks a bit better. And you're like, well, why would we use this? Maybe you wouldn't use it. Maybe you can read all of this perfectly well. But many people have color blindness, or they have difficulty in reading data that is in different colors. If you can allow them to use their own color scheme, make it much easier for them to read. The same as changing the color theme of our CLI. So it's much better. Anyway, right. Let's exit out of that, because otherwise the rest of the demos won't work. So if you remember that we were working on the Data Weekender database, but now somebody's asked us a question about the other database. What we can do is, if we can have a look, see where we are. We're in the Data Weekender. And if we switch to MS SQL and then have a look, now we're connected to DB Junk. So as easy as that, I'm able to switch between which instance I'm connected to. So I've got a MS SQL 2, it's got my Data Weekender, SQL, it's got my DB Junk. Now I can just flip between the two. And these have been dynamically created. So you just have to remember your MS SQL, your MS SQL 2, your MS SQL 3, the next one will be 4, the next one will be 5, and carry on like that. But that's okay. That's cool. So let's get rid of our container. We finished doing our work on here, and we want to get rid of it. And it says, aha, remember, more help. It's really good. Current context is MS SQL. Do you want to continue? No, actually, no, I don't. No, thank you. Okay, we'll cancel that, because what I needed to do is actually get rid of the other instance, the one with Data Weekender, because we've finished, we've solved that. The columns have crazy names and we want to get rid of it. So let's delete that. Do you want to delete this? Yes, please. Thank you very much. I'd like to delete this container. Okay, actually, CMD says, I'm not going to do this for you because there's a user database here. So it says, I found the MDF files. That's how I know there's a user database. And I am not going to drop them because this is a container. And inside this container, there is no backup. Once it's gone, it's gone. Okay, we haven't got a backup of this at all anywhere else. All of our data files are inside this container. So if you would like me to get rid of this, it says, you could just do a drop database if you mounted a database, or you can just use the force loop. So we'll just use the force. So we'll get rid of that. instance, and straight away it's gone, and it says, the current context is now MS SQL. Oh, okay, well, actually, let's get rid of that one as well. So we'll stop that, and it'll say, everything's created successfully. And if we were to run it again, it's going to say, kind of a minute, you haven't got context. If you want to, this is how you can do it. So it's really useful. Now I'm going to just switch out my demo slightly. See if I can remember to create an instance called that, because then I think the next thing will work for me. So let's come down here, back to where we were in demo. And how about if instead of creating an instance and giving a user database and passing in a file, perhaps I want to restore a backup? Well, I can use this -- using command, and that allows me to pass in any doc.back file that's available on an HTTP or HTTPS endpoint, and I can just put this straight in, and then with my accept EULA and my cached, then I can straight away restore the database. You see there we've got an AdventureWorks stored there, but let's face it, that's brilliant for demos, but actually most people in this scenario are going to have their backups in Azure Storage. So if you've got your backup in Azure Storage, you can go and get your SAS token for that file, and then we'll put in create MS SQL, accept EULA, cached, using, this is our special flag, and I'm also going to add in the verbosity. The verbosity lets us see what, how much logs do we want to see. So we can rate from 1 to 5. 1 is none at all. 5 is all of the logs. So let's have a look at all of the logs, because why not? Let's see what we're getting here. So now this time it's going to say, right, okay, what are we doing? So we've got a trace. Here we go, and log, just getting our config file, because we need to know what our ports are. So we'll go and have a look, see what the next. Stop it, show me too slow, Rob. To say what's the next file. We're going to see what the next file is, and then it'll go and do a download of this file from the SAS key, I'm looking at that, from the Azure storage. And then it says, right, okay, so we've saved it here, and you see it saved it to var opt MS SQL backup, some online DB backup. And now we're going to restore the database. So it's now going to build a SQL statement to restore any .back file from a Linux file system. Hey, this is really useful stuff. If you need this, you could go and take it, make use of it. It's all here. And it's going to build a file list table. It's going to restore file list only from the disk to grab the data. And it's going to create a SQL statement to restore the database. And then once it's done that, it's then going to convert it. It's going to upgrade our database because we're running on SQL 2022. And then once it's done that, it's going to alter the login, Mr. Rob, and set the default database to some online DB backup, which is the one that we've done. So excellent. That's super cool. If we have a look, we've got a database called some online DB backup, and now we can open it in ADS. And again, this almost always works, except when Rob does lots and lots of demos and test stuff this morning. Enable a trust certificate. Yes, please. Oh, login failed. Drat. Why is the login failing? Let's have a look. Do we have anything? So I've got no 1434. Oh, maybe I do. No, there's a 1433. 1435. Let's get rid of all of these. See what we get. We'll give it one more go, because it is kind of cool when you see it running. Let's do that again. And where is my? Oh, did I not quit it? I didn't quit it, Rob. That will be why. Let's try it again. Let's see what happens this time. Maybe we'll get it. Enable trust certificate. No, it's not going to work. So I'm not going to, every time I see that, I'm going to ignore it. But your machine is going to work unless you do lots and lots of demos. And this might be an insider's thing. I will raise an error message issue with the GitHub. So let's get rid of that. Okay, so we've taken a backup that we've got stored in Azure, and we brought it back down. And we've used that. What about if we want to use SQL CMD to connect to our Azure? If we looked at our help, you'd have seen that for our authentication method, we'd got Active Directory integrated, password, default, interactive, managed identity, service principal, SQL password. So really useful. You can build this into all of your automated processes and make use of SQL CMD and your Azure login. So we'll make sure that we're logged in. We'll make sure I'm not connected to somebody else's Azure subscription. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to say SQL CMD, pass in the server name and database name, and use the authenticator method Active Directory integrated. So that's going to use the token for the session that I'm in now. So because I have used AZ login to log in, it's going to use that connection context to log in to this server. And then that means that what we can do is we can run a query. Let's run a query. Here we go. And you can see that on Christmas Eve, I went looking for Santa when I was writing, and I didn't see him anywhere because this is my Strava data that I've got into an Azure SQL database. So it's really easy. But actually, plot twist, this has been here anyway. If we just use this -G, as long as we had got ourselves logged in with AZ CLI, we were already logged in. We could already just use this -G and we were able to just get in. So that's brilliant. We've now used SQL CMD to spin up a container for something we were running on a certain version. Somebody came and interrupted us, and we looked at the Data Weekender one, which we created from a input file when we'd created the name of it. We've downloaded from an HTTPS endpoint a backup file. We've taken it from a SAS file, from an Azure backup using a SAS token. We've pulled that down. Now, you remember, you see what I'm saying all the time, pulling that down. So if you try and restore the Stack Overflow database into this, it's not going to work because your container probably isn't going to have enough storage space for you to be able to do that. So what this is doing is it is getting that back up and it's moving it into the container. And then when it's finished doing that, stop tracking me, thank you very much. When it's finished doing that, what it does is restore it. So then you've got the size of the backup and then another size of the backup for your data files to be able to do that as well. Oh, that is going to distract me intensely. So let me try and fix that camera to stop it doing that. Anyway, let's move on. Maybe you have an open source project called DBAs, and you have a set of containers, a container with a set of databases that you use to validate your PowerShell module. Maybe you want to use SQL CMD to go and explore that. So now we can do this. We're going to do a create MS SQL. In fact, I'm just going to run this. I'm going to create MS SQL. I'm going to call the container DBAs. I'm going to tell the container that you think you're on a server called William Durkin. Accept our EULA. We're going to use cached so we don't go and download it. Going to create a context, but this time I'm going to give it a name. So remember, previously we just had MS SQL 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we're going to actually have a name for it. We're going to call it DBAs1. We're going to get this from the registry DBAs, and we're going to get in the repository SQL instance 1. So I've got a DBAs Docker Hub account, and we have SQL instance 1, and I want to use this particular tag, and we have verbosity of 4, so we can see what's going on. This time you see we've started up our database. I'll do Control-C to come out of that. Now, here's the problem. What we've done is we've got a Mr. Rob at DBAs1. So this is my user to connect through to this instance. And that's brilliant, except that I've set up this container myself. And this container doesn't know anything about DBAs1 at all. So how can I get SQL CMD to make use of the user that I've got embedded in, that's my SQL admin, that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new user. So I set my SQL CMD password, dbatools.io. Don't ever put your passwords into scripts that you put on the internet, except when they're passwords that everybody knows, because everybody knows that DBA Tools 1, our demo instances use this as their password. Now we're going to add ourselves a user. I'm going to call it SQL admin. That's the name of the user that we refer to within our config. And it's going to be the username SQL admin, because that's the name of the SQL authenticated user inside our instance. And we're going to have a password encryption of DP API. So that means in our config, you can see we now have, as well as Mr. Rob at DBHX, we've also got this SQL admin here. It says password encryption is DPA API, and the password is redacted. Now remember, what we can do is just add the raw, and we've got that password. And this is stored in a file. So I'm going to say that nobody on this call is going to have the skills to be able to take this file onto another machine and take out the password. But I'm also going to say that somebody in the world is going to have the skills to be able to take that file and get the password out of it, probably. DPA API means it's encrypted with a hash of this machine and this user. So it should only be those two things that are able to unlock it, but nothing is perfect. But knowing that, we've got our new context, and now we're going to add our context to, add our user to a new context. So we're going to create a context called DBHX SQL admin. I'm going to say I want to use the existing endpoint DBHX1, and I'd like you to use the user SQL admin. And it says, great, I've done that. Here are the things that you can do. Remember, help on this is brilliant, so useful. So let's switch our context to use DBHX SQL admin, and let's see what databases we've got. So DBHX is checked on all the latest and greatest modern databases like Northwind and Pubs. Maybe this one will work in Azure Data Studio. I know I said I wasn't going to try, but I'm going to try, because it's cool when it works. Yes, enable trust. Wow, look at that magic. Great, just to prove it, there we go, we're in. So we're able to get in, just to show how wonderful that ADS thing can be. Okay, let's do a delete. Let's actually do a delete with a dash Y. Oh no, not with a dash Y, with a dash. Yes, there we go. Oh, I need a force. Rob, you need the force. There we go. So we're going to get rid of that instance. So that's really cool. And now we end up in a scenario where we're stopping our instance. Why are you taking so long to stop it? Okay, you've all done. So that is the SQL CMD and how amazing it is. And that is what is available now. That is version 1.4.0. But if you remember, what I said was here, you can go and have a look and you can see what is coming. And that means that you can go and see what people have been working at. So you see, look, round out the use scenario, add a command for adding a local file, adding a backpack, an MDF, an LDF, this or that. What you can do, if you're interested, if you're a bit nerdy like me, is you can go and build up this repository into a Go dev container. And then you can say, yeah, what I'd like you to do is to run this command and give me the version of SQL CMD that is in this repository. So I've done that, because why not? If you want to see what's coming next, let's see what we can do. Remember, we can run as many versions of SQL CMD alongside each other as possible. And now we're just going to jump into this directory where we've created this exe from that PR. And I'm going to set SQL CMD except EULA environment variable, so we don't have to keep on going through here. And we'll do a dash whack SQL CMD, so we're getting it from this local directory. And you can see we're in the same thing. It doesn't have a version, but it's got everything else. And it's got this use command, download database into the container. So it tells you, definitely comes into the container. MDF, backpack, DACpack, back. So this time, what you can do is you could create your container. So we'll create a container, use -- cache so we don't download a new image every time. We're going to do the same thing. Create a container with the 2022 image and rotate the SA password, create a new user. And this time I'm going to say, well, actually, I want to restore a backup. Now, most of the time, we're going to want to restore a backup in this scenario from our own machine. So I'm going to say, right, just bring it from SQL Backups AdventureWorks 2017. And you can see what it's done is tells you converted. I've restored the database, all 3 pages of it, and now I'm going to convert it from 869 to 957. There we go. So we'll do an upgrade all the way through. Now it's all along. It's all online. There we go. Now we've got our database restored from our local machine, from a backup on a local machine. So we get rid of that again. This time, actually, okay, maybe I don't want to restore it as that. That's the part. I want to simulate UAT. So I've got a UAT application running in a container. I want to connect to this. So this time I want to restore the database, but I'm going to restore it as that database name instead of AdventureWorks 2017. So if we do that restore, and this time we just add in a comma and that database name, and there we are. Now we've restored our database with that database name. So that's excellent. That's good. But maybe I just want to do all of that in one line. Just grab the backup from my local machine, restore it into my instance, and then be able to connect to it. So if I just look at that, we'll do a query. There we are, connected to AdventureWorks 2017. So get rid of that. And this time I'm going to rename it. So these are all new things that are coming through. I'm going to be able to create my instance. I'm going to be able to use a backup of my own, and I'm going to be able to change the name of the database. And it'll go through. And this time it's got a name that's called yet another database name, just to show you that I can. So we'll get rid of that. And lastly, what we can actually do with this version of sqlcmd, which is really neat, is I can create a new instance using the cache version, so the latest version that's on my machine, and then I'm going to restore this backup file into it, and I'm going to give it a really long name, and then I'm going to open Azure Data Studio all in one hit. And this time, I bet you it doesn't actually log in, but you know, there we go. We'll query it. And this time you see it's an even longer database name, just to see if anybody has read this. They did. So got there just in time. So there we go. So we will force remove that one as well. Now, one of the things that you can do when you need to restore your on-prem database into Azure is create a backpack. It's the only way that you're going to get that restore from here to there. And a backpack with a B is the database and the schema and the data. So a DACpack with a D is actually just the schema, unless you have some files and you want some static data in there. The backpack with a B has all of the data in it. So there are processes that people have built, particularly Jess Schultz. Yeah, for bird, just in bird, that B. It's Jess built this process which will take a file when it drops into an Azure storage account and spin up an instance and restore the database in and create the backpack from that database and dump it somewhere else and then pick it up and put it into Azure so that clients could very simply and easily do that. And what happened was that people went, okay, great, here's my MDF file. Well, why have you given us an MDF file? Surely you have a backup of your on-prem. No, got the data file. I'm going to give you the data file, so then you've got them, you can use that. Okay. So when it came to using sqlcmd, they were like, well, let's do the same thing as we've done, but with an MDF file. So we'll grab an MDF file. And this time we're going to have a sqlcmd, create MS-SQL. We're cached. Remember, this is still just this version that I built from the PR from Stuart. and we can do that. And now we have grabbed an MDF file, the car factory file, and it's bringing the database online. File activation failure. Look, see, the physical file name may be incorrect because it's not there. So what it's done is created us a new log file. Great, with attach. Super good. And now it's upgraded it as well. And now we can see that it's there. Another database boolean. There we are. As easy as that. So that in, we've gone quick, gone 45 minutes. See, I could have done a 9-hour session in 60 minutes. I talked too quickly. Now we have learned all about MS SQL. So SQL command, or even MS SQL. Stop reading off there. SQL command. All the things you can do. Don't be worried about all of the container stuff because you don't need to worry about it. It doesn't need to exist. If you're not interested in looking at your Docker desktop or your Podman, doesn't matter. We don't have to worry about it. This was just so that you could see what is coming through.